living la vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage. We're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal. Yeah, you're getting closer, motivated and focused. Don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
Hello, my dear.
Hi, Jimmy.
All right, so I have to ask the question before we start. Is it Madeline or Madeline?
It's Madeline.
So I had it right.
Nobody except for my husband is allowed to call me Madeline.
Well, the only reason I ask is I've made that mistake. I've worked in retail and all kinds of things. So when I see people wearing name tags, I always take a stab at the name, even if it's kind of funky monkey or it's on that border of it could be this, it could be that. So I take a shot at one. More times than not, I get it right. So I called you Madeline at the beginning of this, so good. But it would have devastated me if you said, "Oh, I'm actually Madeline." So.
Oh, no. You know, I do the same thing. I try to always use people's names. And even if you get it wrong, I think that they still feel good. They're happy that you even use their name at all.
Oh, especially like in a grocery store, and we're just jibber jabbering. We'll get started with the show in a minute, but especially when you're like in the grocery store and then people are on their phone while they're checking out. I'm like, my God, no, get off your damn phones.
Yeah, exactly.
No manners anymore in this young whippersnapper generation.
Right.
Although you're very young, you're considered a millennial, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm 31.
Yeah, you're a millennial.
But when I was growing up, it was like just around that time when kids were starting to get cell phones, and like my family was one of the last families I knew to get a computer in our house. But I was raised pretty different than a lot of my friends, where I seem to have more of a similar upbringing to what my parents experienced. And
so you're more my generation. So your parents are probably Gen X, a little older than me, Gen X. And so, that's fun. That's great. Yeah, I remember the first time I got a beeper. That's how old I am. We were excited about the beeper in the early 90s. So
yeah, I remember thinking beepers were so cool, but no one in my family ever had one.
I had one. It made me feel important, and I was a nobody. Like literally nobody would ever call, but I was like, somebody please call just so I can get beat. So.
We should bring those back and get rid of smartphones.
Yes. Oh, trust me, I would love to get rid of these things if I could, but unfortunately it is a necessary evil to do all the things that I do in my work. Well, let's get this show on the road. Thank you for being here today. And thank you guys for watching. We're going to do this for the Living La Vida Low Carb Show coming up here in a few weeks. And so we love to give you the first sneak peek here on Instagram Live. So are you ready, Madeline?
I'm ready. Let's get started.
All right, here we go. So guys, that right there is Madeline Evergreen. She is healthy_Madeline over on Instagram. Of course, Madeline, 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 or Madeline, I guess is how you would spell it. So she is a health coach and does some wonderful videos. I love watching your reels. I was looking at a few of them before we came on the air today where you were trying kidneys for the first time.
Yeah.
And there was one where you had gizzards. You were trying gizzards for the first time. Here it is, eating gizzards for the first time. And you stuck the gizzards in your mouth, and that look on your face, I want people to be able to see it. They were watching the video. I want them to see, look at the look on her face, you guys, when she realizes it does not taste good. I was like, I love this girl. She is so amazing. But you've been out there doing your thing, Madeline, and you're amazing with the work that you do. You've overcome a whole lot of health issues in your life, which we're going to talk about with a keto and carnivore approach. You are a professional podcaster, just like yours truly. Your podcast is called Project Keto Podcast. So officially welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So tell us your story about your health journey, how you found keto carnivore and how it helped with some of the health issues you were dealing with.
Great. Yeah, my health story goes all the way back to my, basically my birth. I mean, I have grown up with a whole childhood full of health problems. In fact, my very first sentence that I ever said out loud was, "My knees hurt." And I remember being a really, really little kid, barely even being able to talk and having severe joint pain and also such bad stomach pains that many times my parents would almost call 911. And then all of a sudden these stomach pains would just go away, or I would be just spontaneously throwing up. And then 5 minutes later, I'd be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I even had growth hormone deficiency growing up. So I was very, very, very small and underdeveloped. Most people thought I was about half my age. And my mom had to really, really push doctors for about 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer, to look into what was going on. No doctor even wanted to address the fact that I was so small and underdeveloped. And so finally she got them to run some tests and then discovered that I wasn't producing growth hormone, and that the prediction would be that I would end up being about 4'6" or even less if I didn't do anything about that. So I'm so grateful to my mom for being so persistent. Although we didn't really have any health focus in our family growing up. We were pretty typical. Like my parents thought low fat or low calorie might be a good idea. I ate a lot of processed foods. I definitely ate meat, but I also was eating mainly like plain white gluten products.
Yes.
So I ended up getting on growth hormone injections that I took for a number of years until I reached the height I am now, which is almost 5'1", which is great in my eyes. I'm thrilled to even be at a normal height.
Considering 4'6" was in your future if you didn't do anything.
Well, and I looked very, very puffy. Like I looked like a baby, where I had all this baby fat, and I was just really odd looking as a little kid. At least when I look back, that's what I think.
Yeah.
So, I took these injections. I grew to a normal height, but I still had extreme health problems, joint pain, digestive issues, serious mood problems, all of that, skin rashes. And nobody ever could tell me why I had growth hormone deficiency or what all these other problems were. So I pretty quickly realized that the medical route wasn't working for me and no one was helping. So towards the end of high school, my junior and senior year, I looked into nutrition more and more and realized that I really should probably quit gluten, dairy, sugar, and corn and soy. And it actually took me an entire year to go more than a couple of hours without eating gluten. I was so addicted. I had to keep sneaking it. So if we had croutons in the cabinet, I would just, like, my family would be watching a movie and I'd say I had to go to the bathroom. I would go and eat a crouton and then I would feel better. It was just like being a drug addict.
You know what it was? Your gut was so effed at the time that your angry bugs were like, feed me, Madeline. And so that's what that was. It wasn't that you inherently wanted those things. It's that you didn't realize you had bigger issues going on in your gut that you now know it was Sibo. But at the time, you had no idea. And so that doesn't surprise me, by the way. A lot of people, I have constant carb cravings. I'm like, you have a gut issue.
Yeah, exactly. And that's totally true. And then it's also a brain neurotransmitter issue because both gluten and dairy do become addictive in your brain.
Yes.
And we're not going to talk all about that. And if you want, you can go back and listen to some past podcast episodes of mine where I do explain why those foods are technically addictive.
Yes.
But
she gets nerdy, she gets really nerdy on her podcast, but I love every bit of it. It's wonderful when you go in depth about that stuff.
Yeah, well, I like to know why things work the way they work. And I find that at least for me, I can't really get better until I know how something works.
Yes.
So I went this whole year really trying to force myself to quit these foods, and I was very unsuccessful until I finally just pushed through with willpower, and I got through about 2 weeks without eating those things. And it just so happened that my mom and my sister and I went to California during those 2 weeks to a Julia Ross conference. And Julia Ross is an author.
I love her.
Yeah, she teaches all about neurotransmitters and all kinds of amazing things. And at this conference, it was really interesting. I'm a high schooler, zero interest in science at the time. Everyone else at the conference was a doctor of some sort. So I felt out of place, but you know what, you have to learn where you have to learn. And this was before a lot of YouTube and social media and other kinds of things. So this is actually how I did my own healing, is to travel and go to these conferences. So at the conference, Julia Ross was handing out these little like Dixie cups of amino acids, and we were supposed to take them and then notice within a couple of minutes if we felt a change. And I took certain targeted amino acids, and for the first time in my whole life, I stopped thinking about food for a couple hours, and I didn't have any need to eat a specific thing. I just felt totally fine. And then at the end of the day, we went out to eat Chinese food, which now it makes me laugh that I would even eat that, but that's what we were eating. And I actually put down my fork and was done with my food when I was done. And I had never had that before. My whole life, going to a restaurant, I eat the whole thing and I'm stuffed, or I'm torturing myself by not eating it all. And I have this intense craving. So I discovered these amino acids, and now I almost refuse to work with people on their diet unless they get onto a specific targeted amino acid routine first. Because if you don't, you're probably going to just be battling willpower, which barely ever works for a person.
And this is something that's not talked about a lot. And I adore Julia, by the way. She and I are really good friends. I interviewed her a million years ago, it feels like. And then I saw her at a conference circa 3 or 4 years ago. And she's like, Jimmy, you're still podcasting? And oh yeah, I'm still podcasting. So she came back on. She had a book, The Craving Cure, at the time. You probably met her when she had the Diet Cure and the Mood Cure for her 2 books at the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she's done amazing work. If you've not looked into neurotransmitters and like you said, targeted aminos, it's amazing. It really, I'm glad to hear that it was a life changer for you.
Yeah, it was a life changer in an aspect of I was able to get off of problematic foods. But honestly, I didn't get that much healthier after that. The one thing I benefited from quitting those foods was I wasn't fainting all the time or vomiting spontaneously. And at the end, it was like I was sitting in class in high school and I would have to get up and throw up in the trash can. It was that bad. So
and they probably thought you had an eating disorder.
They did.
Right?
I was always talked to at school about my bulimia, which I've never had. I don't have an eating disorder. I've never had one, but I've had serious problems with just not being able to keep food down. So yeah, it was really embarrassing, but it was mostly just really uncomfortable for me. Yeah. So I got off those foods and I've never eaten them again. I've never gone back unless somehow it got snuck into my plate without me knowing. But I've literally never eaten gluten, sugar, or those kinds of foods again since then. So that's amazing. It's been over a decade now. But it took me still another number of years to really get any better with my health. So I'm not going to go through every single thing that's ever happened, but I continue to have severe constipation, severe bloating, unexplained puffiness and weight gain, and just all kinds of digestive problems, massive mood problems. And eventually, go ahead.
Did they ever identify the root cause and what started all of this? Was this a genetic thing in your family? Was it just some freak something with you that you got used to eating gluten and then the gluten started feeding some bugs, or did you get some kind of bug in you, or like did they ever kind of trace it back? Did you trace it back to see where this started?
No, but I have a lot of assumptions I can make. For one thing, when my mom was a baby and a little kid, she had chronic ear infections and took years and years and years of antibiotics. And out of all of her siblings, she has 8 siblings, of all of them, she had health problems and nobody else really did. And she had food sensitivities. She was the only person in her family that was overweight. Nobody else was. Until now, she's like a machine. She's super healthy. But growing up, she had a lot of problems. Then she had my sister and I have an older sister. My sister also struggles with her health. But neither of us were breastfed. My mom didn't know any better. So that's a problem. Yes. Luckily, we were both born vaginally, but we weren't breastfed just because at the time it was kind of in vogue to do bottle feeding. That was just more popular, and you just think it's more convenient. And then I also had a lot of bad foods in my diet. I ate a ton of gluten and sugar growing up. So I think that I already started out with some issues because my mom struggled with gut problems. Then I think it just rapidly progressed from there. Luckily, go ahead.
I was going to say, look, I don't think your story is uncommon. I think some people say, well, I had all the Oreos and the Cheez-Its and all the crap, what I call crappy garbage now, when I was growing up, and I never had any problems, Madeline. So I don't understand what you mean when you say it was giving you all these problems. And this is where I feel like we need to have a heart for people that have more than just the food. Like, yes, that food may not have caused you issues in the moment for you, but other people have situations. Like for myself, I had a 300+ pound mom when I was born. So I was already at a very high predisposition for insulin resistance as a result of that. And so people look at me and go, well, you should be able to eat healthy and get your weight under control. And I'm like, you don't understand the exacerbation that having kind of a predisposition in your case, because your mom had other issues. In my case, my mom dealing with morbid obesity and I guess pushing inflammation levels being higher and glucose being higher, it impacts you in your life that you're going to have to deal with that as if you had some acute disease when you were young and you were in utero, you had a disease already starting to develop.
Yeah, exactly. So, and not to do TMI here, but I'm just a TMI kind of person. The last number of years, I've also done quite a bit of parasite cleansing, and I have pooped out thousands of huge worms, like multiple foot long worms. No wonder I was constipated. I think I grew up with a belly completely jammed full of worms. And it's really common. It's like if you're thinking, not you, I know, Jimmy, but the people listening thinking you don't have parasites.
Everybody.
You do. You do.
Yes.
But I think for me, it was like a physical blockage that was severe in my body. And I think that's actually why I got Sibo.
Yes. And by the way, if you guys are having a crappy day, just go to Madeline's page. She talks about poop all the time.
I really do. What's really funny about that is growing up, I was so embarrassed by poop, and I would like do whatever it took to not have anybody ever know if I pooped. And maybe that's why I ended up with constipation. I mean, it was definitely a psychological problem till I finally started doing coffee enemas. And now I feel like I love talking about poop. Like my friends come over and it's like half the conversation is about poop. So
yes, poop party.
Yeah, it's just part of life, and it's something you just have to talk about.
By the way, May said half of the problem with gluten is the glutinous flour, and it's fortified with iron and crap and all that kind of stuff here in the US and in the UK. Yeah, I mean, and it's usually fortified with very synthetic forms, not the whole forms you would get from, say, animal foods in your diet. Speaking of animal foods, you have traditionally been eating mostly kind of a carnivore-ish type of diet, and you recently added back in one specific type of carbohydrate. I was really fascinated when I was going through your page of seeing why you did this. Tell us a little bit about why you added back in this specific carb.
Yeah, so I've been doing carnivore-ish, mostly meat for almost 2 years now. And it's done wonders for me, but I know I don't want to eat like this for the rest of my life. And I'm doing some pretty intense gut healing protocols and trying to get myself able to tolerate more foods for the times that I want to. So I've reintroduced some fruit, and it's going really well. I'm really surprised actually that I can tolerate this, and also that I haven't gained weight. I kind of have been like a really big believer in like not eating any high carb foods at all. Yes. I haven't really eaten fruit for like years, even before carnivore.
Yes.
But it's gone really well, and I'm so thrilled.
A lot of people ask me, Jimmy, how do you get such good deep sleep? Well, there's a lot of things that I do, but one of the newest things that I recently added is this upgraded magnesium from a company called Upgraded Formulas. Go to their website, upgradedformulas.com, and you can learn all about this nano technology that they use for this particular mineral of magnesium. Again, it's called Upgraded Magnesium, and it's got all the different forms of magnesium in it. using the nanotechnology so it gets absorbed a lot better. Guys, I have seen my deep sleep improve by as much as 30 to 40% simply by adding in this product along with sunshine exposure, darkness in the room, cooler temperature, all of the things that I always have done. So again, upgradedformulas.com is the website. Go check them out. Paul Saladino would be so proud of you, and he would say, fruit is not bullshit.
No, it's not. Fruit is not. And it's, I mean, I don't know if everybody should be eating fruit. Like if I had a serious problem with diabetes, I probably would be super, super careful or keeping it to just some berries. But luckily, I don't have a blood sugar issue at all. And I see that I am very well fat adapted, that I can have some fruit, have my blood sugar spike a normal amount, like maybe to 110 or 120 for me, and then it just comes back down to about 80 or 85 where it should be. So I can see that works for me. Also, I don't have any digestive problems or joint pain or rashes or anything like that that have popped up from the fruit. If anything, I've gotten benefit where while the longer I was doing strict carnivore and only eating animal foods, I was getting these worse and worse problems with thirst. And I've never had a problem being overly thirsty. I'm never somebody who like sips on water during an exercise class. I just drink my water and then I'm good for a few hours. But I was noticing the last couple of months, I cannot get through a workout without taking a water break multiple times. And then after dinner, I would have this insatiable thirst where I felt like I'm going to die if I don't drink like 3 or 4 glasses of water. So I heard from Paul Saladino that he was having some electrolyte problems too. And his theory is that when you are in ketosis all of the time, you really can struggle with retaining electrolytes, and you might just be eliminating them out at a pretty rapid rate. Now, I'm not an expert on that topic, but that's just what he says. And I tend to think that he's a pretty smart person. So I tried it out, having a little bit of fruit. Usually it's the last thing I eat at night. And I'm not so thirsty anymore. And it's going great. I also feel like I'm sleeping better. Like I'm more calm at bedtime and I can sleep through the night better. And I'm thrilled because in my dream life, I can eat all the food that I want. So even adding in one thing is a big deal for me.
Well, yeah. And I love that, by the way, because a lot of people get very hard-nosed when it comes to their diet. Well, I went keto and I'm getting the benefits from keto and I'm going to stay keto for life. Great. I'm glad you have that mentality, you guys. But be mindful that keto is therapeutic, meaning do it for a period of time to help you heal, and then slowly add back in things that can help continue that healing in a new way. Sometimes there's an acute healing that needs to take place, insulin resistant over to insulin sensitive. And the only way you test how insulin sensitive you've become is to add back in a little bit of carbohydrate. Now, I've tried that. Doesn't work so well for Jimmy Moore. I have to stay a little more on the carnivore side most of the time, and I'm okay with that. I eat luxurious grass-fed meats and pasture meat. I'm not quite at the kidney and gizzard level yet. You're next level over Jimmy Moore right now.
Kidneys were really good, I have to say, and hearts. I don't like organs. Like I have a goat liver in the fridge I'm so afraid to eat. It's probably going to just sit there for a while. Yeah. But I was really shocked at how good the kidneys and the hearts were.
Yeah, you were talking about the kidneys had a nice texture, a little bit kind of gamey taste, but a good texture. But yeah, I love beef heart. Beef heart really isn't that different than just ground beef. And then I've had beef tongue, so you can make lengua. So there's lots of little bits that you can use from the animal. And look, if we talk about wanting to be nutrient dense and wanting to get all the nutrition from an animal, we should probably try to push ourselves to eat most of the animal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really important to try to eat all the different parts of the animal. It's also great for respecting the animal and for honoring our planet. And I know a lot of people feel guilt when they eat animal products because they think that they're, killing these animals, which you are. But they think of it in a bad light. And I don't think of it that way at all. I think of it as that these animals are actually here as a part of the circle of life. And, when we die, we're going to go into the soil and we're going to actually make soil and nutrients for the earth. And that's one of our contributions here. And for me personally, I choose to eat only meat that's from regenerative farms. And 100% grass-fed beef. I mean, I could go through all the meats. I'm not going to, but I'm very, very particular about where I buy my meat from. I buy it all directly from farmers that I know and that I talk to and I meet. And then I try to buy the whole cow, and I try to get all of the organs in the different parts. I even, this is kind of cool, I even am getting the skull of a cow that I recently purchased and the hide, like the fur, because I want to actually use these parts in my life. I don't really know what I'm going to do with a skull, but I thought, you know, it's better than it just going in the trash. I'm going to,
like a bowl.
I'm going to put it on my wall or something, or put it like in my garden. I don't know, but I just feel that I am consuming this cow. I want to actually honor and participate in this cow, including eat all of the different body parts from it.
So if you got busybody neighbors, Madeline, I've got a perfect thing for that head, for the skull. Stick it at your front door, and nobody will ever come to your house.
That's a great idea. So if anybody walks up and tries to shoot me up with something, that's going to be a skull on my door.
And you need to put some like robotics or animatronics on it so it moves with motion detector. Rah, you know.
Perfect. I'll do that. That's a great idea.
And it doesn't just have to be Halloween. It could be year-round, baby. Yeah, nobody will ever mess with your household.
Yeah.
Well, this is awesome, and I love that you're out there sharing your story and learning along the way. Look, that's how I built what I do. You know, people are like, wow, you know so much about keto and cholesterol and fasting and now childhood trauma and some of the mindset stuff. I'm like, it's not by accident. I just studied and learned, and like you, wanted to know the mechanisms of why things work. Why am I this way? And how can I fix me? And so you did the same thing. But the fun part about it is when you fix yourself and you figure things out yourself, you can disseminate that information over social media. And now on your podcast, again, the Project Keto podcast, I mean, you're very bubbly on screen and you talk very clearly. So obviously you're wonderful for podcasting. What made you want to do a podcast?
Oh, gosh. Well, I just love teaching. I've been teaching different types of things since I was 14 years old, and I like presenting on video or audio. I've always been drawn to that. And so I just started it a number of years ago. I don't remember what year, but it's been like about 3 or 4 years since I've been doing it. And I just did it and I haven't stopped. And most of it is solo cast. It's mostly just me on there. And it's because I like to teach things sequentially. I like to teach things a little bit like a course or a lesson. Yeah. And so I have these different seasons of the podcast. Like, for example, right now we're in season 6, and it's all about going back to the basics of health. And so people listen from the first episode on, and you feel like you're taking a class or a course. And it is actually almost the same material that I do teach in some of my classes. I teach a homeschool nutrition class for teenagers. It's very similar to that class, but geared more towards adults. So I just love teaching information. And when I learn something, I want to spread it around and tell everybody about it. And so that's why I have my podcast. It's really just my own outlet for talking.
I've been doing this for 16 years and people think it's easy, and it is now, but it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people are like, oh, anybody could do a podcast. I'm like, all right, show me how it's done. And you're proving consistency, passion, and content is the key. And I love it. And I'm not surprised that you've been able to be out there now several years. Most people get gung-ho for about 5 or 10 episodes, Madeline, and then they're like, yeah, that's for the birds. No.
Yeah, I know.
I do 4 a week.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard doing podcasting. Now, I don't think it's hard talking or presenting or planning what I'm going to say, but I don't know anything about websites or technology or microphones or computers, but I did actually learn all that myself, and I'm really glad. I think it's important that we always are learning new skills. And for me, the biggest learning hurdle I've had with the podcasting is the technology. And I'm really glad that I know it now. And actually getting ready to have my mom start a podcast too, and I'll do the whole thing except for the talking. She'll do that. I'll put it on for her, and I'm really glad to have a new skill.
Yeah, look at you getting your Gen X mom to be a podcaster. Like, it's not as hard. It's not as bad as people think. And I'll often have people write me and go, will you help me start a podcast? And I've helped hundreds of people like start. It's like, it's not hard. You just have to kind of know, get your ducks in a row and everything, and kind of know some basic things. But the technology is so great here in 2022. You should have seen in 2006 when I first started, I had the little Plantronics microphone that looked like the Britney Spears, microphone when she was on stage, and it's just so rudimentary. It's almost like the little cup and the string and and then you log on to iTunes. There was no such thing as Apple Podcasts or Spotify and Stitcher and all these places. And so, yeah, it's definitely come a long way. And I don't think anybody and everybody needs to podcast. Unfortunately, the pandemic brought a lot of people into podcasting that had no business podcasting. But I'm glad you're out there. You're definitely doing your part to get the message out. So good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So what's a topic in keto carnivore that you think doesn't get enough airplay? What can we talk about that you feel like nobody gives this credence?
Well, not many people talk about Sibo.
Yes.
In relation to keto and carnivore, or at least when I do hear a lot of people talking about it, it makes me cringe.
So let's talk about that.
They don't get it.
So let's talk about that. Let's dig at that a little bit. First of all, for people not familiar, it stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, Sibo, SIBO. And so tell us what that is and where do people get it wrong?
Well, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is exactly what it sounds like. It's bacteria that's overgrown into your small intestine. So I wish I had my little diagram of the organs here, but if you don't know what the small intestine or the large intestine look like, after this, go look it up. But you've got your small intestine first that leads into your large intestine. And bacteria from the large intestine can overgrow and back up and land backwards in the small intestine where it shouldn't be. Oh, there we go. So there's a nice diagram there. So it isn't necessarily bad bacteria. Like if someone's struggling with candida or something, that's a different thing. It's just the bacteria has overgrown into the small intestine where it's not supposed to be. And then the symptoms that people usually experience from Sibo are almost everybody says, I can't eat anything. That's like the ding, 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 you have Sibo. If you say like, I can't eat anything, and you literally can't, like you get so sick no matter what you eat. Or people will have severe belly distension, bloating. They'll have either constipation or diarrhea or altering, and severe stabbing intestinal pains, like really, really bad pains that make you double over, or you have to call in and not go to work, or you think you have to go to ER, that kind of extreme pain. And you can do testing for Sibo. I found out I had Sibo about 6 or 7 years ago, and at the time, nobody really was talking about it except for one person who was off writing a book and taking time off. So I didn't have anybody helping me except for her blog. So I treated the Sibo myself. You can do breath testing. You would typically do this through a doctor, but if you find someone you can order it through, you can do the breath test at home. And you breathe into these little tubes. There's a whole protocol, and it will measure these different gases in your breath and basically tell you if you have Sibo and what type of Sibo you have. So I had Sibo, and I did my testing, and I interpreted my lab results myself.
What's the name of the test, Madeline? What's the name of the test?
Well, it's just called a Sibo breath test. I don't remember if there's a specific one, but you could probably do any kind of Sibo breath test. Okay. But I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend you do that. At the time, it was helpful because I didn't know where else to turn or what else to do. But now, the treatment that I would suggest for Sibo would be something to do whether you actually have Sibo or not. It would be more based off of if you have these digestive problems. Now, the reason why I wouldn't just tell everybody go out and do a breath test is because one, it's very expensive. It's usually a minimum of $250 or more, and you have to do it multiple times or it's a waste.
Yeah.
Two, it's really inconvenient. You have to eat a very strict, uncomfortable, limited diet for about 4 or 5 days before the test, and then you have to drink a sugary solution during the test, and then you have to continue that diet afterwards and go into a whole treatment, and it's like not comfortable or easy. It's you have to take all this time off work, and it's not good.
So what's the diet leading up to it, the 5-day period? What is that diet?
Well, looking back, you probably could actually just do a carnivore diet, although that's not what the directions said to do. It said to eat, like fast as much as you can. So barely eat. And then like if you just did a water fast, that would probably be ideal, but lots of people aren't going to do a 4-day water fast. You could eat things like plain chicken breast. I think they said you could have white rice, stuff that's mostly just very, very plain. I don't understand why they say to have white rice though, because the real problem with the Sibo bacteria is that the bacteria feeds off of carbohydrates.
Right.
Even a flake of black pepper, like that tiny of a carbohydrate can give someone with Sibo stabbing pains.
Whoa.
Or like severe issues. So I just don't recommend that testing. And instead, if you suspect that you have Sibo, my best recommendation would actually just be to go on a very strict carnivore diet without dairy and possibly without eggs. That would be something to kind of test for yourself, but go on a very, very strict carnivore diet, meaning don't cheat. Like don't have carb foods occasionally. And it's not going to be for the rest of your life.
Right.
But you go on that for a minimum of 3 months, even better if you could give it about a year or so. And then in the meantime, look up some kind of Sibo killing bacteria protocols using supplements. Don't go with the medical route.
I was going to ask you, what does
antibiotics?
I was going to ask you, what does mainstream medicine push? Antibiotics?
Antibiotics, and it works. And then when you're done, it comes back worse.
Because it just lies dormant in low levels, and then when you remove the thing killing it, it just repopulates. It's kind of like cancer. Unless you get it all, it can come back.
Well, that, and if you don't address the root cause of why you have Sibo, it will come back, whether you do a carnivore diet or you do medical route. You have to find out why you have Sibo. So some very common reasons why people get Sibo are stress is the number one. And I know everybody goes, oh yeah, stress. Seriously, if you're living a stressful life or you have chronic stress in your body, like chronic joint pain, chronic digestive stress, any chronic stress going on, emotional, mental, physical, it has to get fixed or your Sibo will come back. Another reason is common food poisoning. So if you're frequently getting food poisoning, it's probably because you're not making hydrochloric acid in your stomach. You need to fix that problem.
Which we know most people don't have a lot of stomach acid. I remember the Nutritional Therapy Association, when I was looking at some of their materials, they were talking about 90%, 9 out of 10 people having low stomach acid because they're not getting enough zinc in their diet and other issues and digestive enzymes. Like it's a chronic issue for a lot of people.
Yeah. So you have to fix the HCl problem, and we won't go into that here, but there's a lot of resources out there for you to figure out how to fix that. One way would be to start by taking hydrochloric acid tablets with your protein meals. Another issue another reason why you might have Sibo is if you have a hiatal hernia. So that's if your stomach is actually physically pulled up partially through the diaphragm and it's pinched in the middle, kind of like if you have a balloon with a rubber band around the middle. Not good. Most people have a mild, if not severe, hiatal hernia. So you would want to go and correct that through a chiropractor or some other kind of body worker who knows how to manipulate your organs, like physically. Don't get surgery for that. It doesn't stick. Another reason people will have Sibo is parasites. And those are all the main reasons I can think of just off the top of my head.
Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine. So where do the other people get it wrong that you're like, oh my gosh, don't tell people that?
Oh, they just say, oh, just eat carnivore and then you'll fix your Sibo.
Yeah, see, the simplicity of that message, because I hear the same thing. Gary Taubes, I love the man to death, wrote some seminal books with low carb, good calories, bad calories, why we get fat and what to do about it, all these books. But he used to say in his lectures, and it would piss me off to no end, Madeline, when he would say this, oh, well, if you eat a low carbohydrate, then you have effortless weight loss. Yes, that's literally how he talks, by the way, in his talks. And so, effortless weight loss. And I'm just like, yeah, screw you. No, not everybody.
No, I've never lost weight doing carnivore. I gained weight, and a lot of people gain weight. But besides that, though, you can't fix Sibo with a diet. You can only reduce the symptoms temporarily. So remember that the symptoms you feel from Sibo, like the stabbing pains or the bloating in your belly, is because you ate some carbohydrates that fed the Sibo bacteria, and then the bacteria go, woo! And they like have this party in there, blow up. They start having their own gas and start pooping in your body, and now you get this distension because there's gas and bacteria like expanding big time in your small intestine where it shouldn't be. So if you just eat carnivore, absolutely, you're going to feel better if you have Sibo, and it's a wonderful tool to have in your tool bag, meaning use it for a year or 2 years, 6 months, whatever is going to be the work for you, but then continue to use it as a tool as needed forever. Like, I'm going to probably be eating mostly carnivore forever, I'm going to assume, or using it as a tool. Like, I think back to these times before I knew I had Sibo, I couldn't eat. I was so sick, I couldn't eat anything. And if I had known that it's actually an option to just eat meat, like, I never even thought that was a choice. I thought that, like, that people that would do that would be the biggest idiots ever. But now I know better. But if I had known that, I would have just eaten meat, and then I could have gone to work, continued my life. I wouldn't have had to lay in bed sick all day. Yeah. Or starving because I couldn't eat.
You know what was funny was I ate keto for many years, and I found myself, without calling it anything new, gravitating more and more and more to the animal foods and less and less and less to the vegetables and the other plants. And I didn't purposely say, ooh, I'm going carnivore. It just drifted that way. It was almost like my body was telling me subliminally, dude, this is the bee's knees. This is where the nutrition is. And I felt best eating that way. And, you know, I would sometimes feel guilty, or my ex-wife would say, aren't you going to have some broccoli with that? I'm like, I really don't want the broccoli. I just want the meat. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're going to really try and treat Sibo, whether you have a diagnosis or not, go with a carnivore diet, and you have to be very strict about it. And every single time you cheat and have some carbs, you're really slowing down the healing process, because the idea here is that you're starving the bacteria. So you don't want to feed them even once. So not everybody has to be a strict carnivore, but in this case, it would be critical that you don't have any carbs, including seasonings or spices or condiments, none of that, and also no dairy. Maybe butter would be okay, or ghee, but other than that, no dairy. Then you do that carnivore diet maybe a year or so, maybe 6 months, and in the meantime, get on a protocol of some type of herbal antibiotics. So you could reach out to different practitioners. You could reach out to me. I can help you come up with a protocol, but you do want to get onto something that's going to start killing stuff off. And you might as well also kill off parasites at the same time, because that's probably part of the problem. Then at the same time, you have to start addressing what could be the root cause of your Sibo. And do some research, look up and find out all of the ideas. There's like dozens of ideas of root causes of Sibo. And it might even be peristalsis, where you no longer have that contraction ability in your intestines to kind of squeeze and contract to move the food and the poop along. Yes. A lot of people lose that tone, and then they get backed up, and then they get Sibo. It could be a vagus nerve problem. It really could be a lot of things. So what you really have to do is fix your life. Fix all of your health problems that you can possibly think of. And I know it's a lot to ask, but if you don't, you're going to have Sibo for the rest of your life, and it's only going to get worse. Then, once you think that you've really gotten some progress, you've killed off a lot of stuff, you've maybe pooped out a bunch of parasites, you've addressed some of the root causes, then try to reintroduce some low, what's the word I'm looking for? Some plant foods that aren't going to be highly toxic or hard to digest.
Yes, so not the ones with oxalates, not the ones with high levels of fiber, I suppose.
Yeah. So like you might try introducing some fruits, some avocado. Don't really go for like the leafy greens, the nuts, the seeds, hot spices, roots, onions, garlic. All of that is going to be a long shot for people that have Sibo. It's going to be a while till you're ready to eat all those things, if ever. But the easier to digest foods, like the foods that would be on one of Paul Saladino's kind of carnivore-ish lists, would be a good starting point. And then notice, if you start eating those and you start to get these stomach pains or the bloating back, stop eating them, because you don't want to go too far. Stop eating them and continue working on the root cause of the Sibo, and continue working on killing off a lot of that bacteria.
So Madeline, have you seen honey exacerbate the Sibo for you?
I don't eat much honey. I've probably had like 1 teaspoon in the last year, but mostly because I think it tastes terrible now after eating carnivore. It's so sweet. I hate it.
It's too damn sweet. Yes.
I don't have any interest in that at all. So that's the real
it's so sweet. When I saw the carnivore, especially Paul and different other ones talking about it, I'm just like, what are you making? Honey baked chicken? Like, what are we doing with the honey? Like, you're not the honey, you know.
But I do have an interesting story about honey, though, because years ago, before I knew about carnivore, I did treat my Sibo a different way. It was so painful and effortful and expensive, but I did do it. And I did it through an elemental diet along with herbal antibiotics. Yes. So an elemental diet is something that typically a doctor will give you these like powders, or they're kind of like shakes, and you only eat that for like 3 weeks while you're doing antibiotics. But I would never do that with a doctor, because what's in those, like the first ingredient is like soybean oil. Yeah. It's terrible. There's like MSG. It's all poison. So I made my own elemental diet formula, which was just powdered amino acids. So that's like the very most broken down form of proteins. They taste really bad, but that's all I consumed for a month straight. Plus, when I was feeling really, really weak, I would have a tiny spoonful of butter, just out of the spoon, and then also really tiny spoonfuls, like specks of honey. And I know you might be thinking, like, why the heck would you eat honey on while you're trying to kill off Sibo? Isn't that a carbohydrate? Well, the reason that you do actually need to include some, well, you don't have to, but it's really helpful to include a tiny amount of some carbs and some calories when you're doing these elemental diets, because it's for about a month long and you don't consume any food. So it's really helpful to have something that you can put in there if you're not going to do a water fast for a month. So honey can be absorbed pretty rapidly before it feeds the Sibo bacteria, especially if you eat like a speck. So I would have like a a taste on my tongue of some honey and some butter. And then I would have loads and loads, like tablespoons and tablespoons of these powdered amino acids. And that's basically what the medical form of the elemental diet formula is, but it's with real ingredients, not Frankenfoods made in a lab. So I did that for about 3 weeks to a month at 3 separate times. And I had to keep doing it because my Sibo kept coming back. So that was pretty hard, I have to say. I know you're into fasting. I mean, imagine doing a month-long fast 3 times. Like, that was really hard. Maybe you would love it, but I did not.
Well, I mean, it's hard, but it gets better the more you do it. And plus there's nuances each fast. Like I just finished a fast. I was trying to go at least 7 days, and I made it just over 6 days. And I actually started blacking out because I think I got depleted in electrolytes, even though I was trying to consciously make sure I stayed electrolyted up. But yeah, there's lots of moving parts as to how it would be difficult to do a 30-day fast. And like you said, 3 times. But yeah, I've done several 21 days, but it's a beast.
It is. And then what's very upsetting is if you're doing that to treat your Sibo, then you get out of the fast and it's like you have the best life ever once you start to reintroduce foods for about a day or 2, and then it all comes back. All that Sibo comes back, and it made me so mad. It was terrible. So this is why I don't really recommend going that route. I would instead recommend a much longer term plan and eat just meat, animal foods, that organs, stuff like that, but not dairy and probably not eggs while you're treating the Sibo.
Yeah, and I love your approach, by the way. Yes, make that the basis of your nutrition, but then you've got to be proactive at doing things to remove the culprits in the Sibo. So, yeah, I mean, it's more than just eat carnivore and all your woes go away. Yeah, no.
Right. Yeah, and for a lot of people that do have Sibo problems, I would suggest that you look up the company Cellcore Biosciences and get on one of their parasite cleanse protocols, especially with the Para-1 supplement. And that's something I've been using for a long time. And I know that it's not a Sibo treatment, but I just would bet my life that if you have Sibo, you have parasites. And it will make such a big difference if you can get those out. So Cellcore is just a really good resource if you don't know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I've seen people talking about the parasites, and I've seen the parasites. They show them in like the toilet bowl, and I'm just like, But it's like, if you don't know it's there, don't go la 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 la. I don't want to know. It's there, guys. You need to deal with it. It's probably something that I'm dealing with that I probably should look closer into. So let's talk here, and let's see if we can do a protocol that maybe will help remove some of those for me. But guys, again, that is Madeline Evergreen. Go follow her over on Instagram, healthy_Madeline. Again, Madeline is how you spell Madeline. She's got a nice little link tree there that has all the links to her podcast and all the products that you like. You got lots of stuff there. So go check her out. And again, the name of her podcast, go check it out, Project Keto Podcast. Well, Madeline, what a fun interview this was. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. I had a really good time.
Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
Woo! You tired of playing the mask game? Me too. That's why I wanted to tell you about the Unmask. This is a breathable, completely breathable. It covers, you can't even see that it's breathable, but it's breathable. Whether you're going on a plane, having to go into a store and wearing this thing, playthemaskgame.com is how you can get this mask. They come in all kinds of colors and everything. In fact, right there, you can see right through it what it is, but when you're wearing it, it does not look like it's anything different, but it's breathable, baby. Playthemaskgame.com.
Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.